great thing about photographic history is there is so much of it, and you can spend hours researching cameras and finding out fascinating facts. And a lot of people will go straight to Google, and there's nothing the matter with going straight to Google, and there's so many good sources of information out there. But lots of people start with Wikipedia and then look at other websites. It's a shame sometimes we forget about books and original source material. Books, obviously because of my generation, I grew up on books and I absolutely love delving into books. And the thing about books is they are there, they are immediately available if you have a collection. Plus you know the sources and you know a little bit about the history of the source, hopefully. So for example, McKeon's is a great photographic guide, and you know that James McKeon, his background, you know it's a trusted source. And one of the problems with the internet, as we all know, is that source of information, and there's a lot of mistruths often about cameras, and once they get said, they get repeated and believed. So when I'm researching cameras, often for my YouTube channel, one of the sources I would look at are these things called the Blue Book, okay? And the Blue Book was a publication by a company called Wallace Heaton. When I was first into cameras, I was always, if I ever went to London, I always popped into Wallace Heaton. Wallace Heaton was a shop down in New Bond Street, and in its heyday, it was the premier photographic store. It was a bit like B&H in the States. It was slightly smaller. New Bond Street is a very exclusive retail street in London. It was by royal appointment. That meant the royal family would use it to buy cameras from, and even in the 70s and 80s, I remember going there and you felt you were going into something a bit special. By which time it had been owned by Dixons for some time. Dixons then became Curry's, and eventually Wallace Heaton, the name disappeared and the shop disappeared. But these photographic guides, which people say were published after the war, I haven't found many after I found lots after the war, but the ones I normally find are from 1959. People in the photographic community have assured me that they are guides before 1959. I just haven't found any. But I use the ones in particular from 1959 up to the 1970s. 1975, 76, I think is the last one I've got. Why are they so useful? They are so useful because they are advertising. It's like a catalogue, and it's a catalogue of cameras and often of the optical things that Wallace Heaton sold. So I'm just looking here, and you've got an advert here for the Zenith 3 in 1963. And the great thing about the Zenith 3 then, it was USSR made 35mm single lens reflex, and it's got the price here of £28, 19 shillings and sixpence. So what we've got here is a complete record of how much that camera was in its day, and you can see what other cameras were around at that time. And it's the 1959 edition, for example. The 1959 edition, for example, explains how certain cameras are still not available due to import duty and due to import restrictions. Because after the Second World War, there was all sorts of import restrictions. And for example, you can't buy a Rolleiflex. It advertises a Rolleiflex, but it says Record and Rolleiflex are at present not freely available owing to import restrictions. We have a superb range of second-hand instruments, fully tested and guaranteed, and we will gladly quote from our stock. And the 59 to 60 edition I find is fascinating because we have a microflex, we have a number of British cameras, and because of these import restrictions, the UK had quite a good camera manufacturing industry. We have something here called the Periflex here, and an advert for the Reed. A Reed is a fantastic camera which I will talk about in another YouTube episode. But we are beginning to see a lot of good quality German cameras there. We also have some very basic cameras. And again, with the Leica and Contax, it says the same thing, are presently not available. But we do have a lovely advert for the Rolleiflex. But as we move on to the 60s, we will find that there's an absence of British cameras because the import restrictions were lifted. The market became full of not just nice, good quality German cameras, but we are seeing the gradual importation of Japanese cameras. Here we have the Nikon, we've got the Nikon F coming in, and more high quality cameras. These books also include this Cine. Cine was incredibly popular at this time, so we got projectors and Cine cameras. And moving on through the 60s, everything's becoming slightly more modern, and it's interesting looking at Wallace Heaton. In the 50s, they are advertising cheaper cameras. By the mid 60s, the cameras are getting more of the high end. So they are fun things to collect. You can pick them up from a couple of pounds each upwards. Really good part of research and an enjoyable read. So that is the Wallace Heaton Blue Book. I think these are really good fun to collect, and you can find them in all sorts of places. They are on eBay, but you often find them at photographic fairs. And so in summary, the Wallace Heaton Photographic Blue Book, look out for them and you might start a collection. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.